understand 2016, we have to go back to 2003 for just a moment. There's a philosopher at Oxford University named Nick Bostrom, and in 2003, he published what looked on the surface like a fairly dry academic paper. It was called, Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? Now, Bostrom wasn't a fringe thinker. He wasn't posting on forums at 2 a.m. He was and still is one of the most cited philosophers working in existential risk and the future of humanity. He's the kind of person that governments and tech billionaires actually call when they want to understand where civilization is heading. And the paper laid out what he called the trilemma. He argued one of three things to be true. Option one: almost all civilization at our level of development go extinct before they ever develop the computing power to run detailed simulations of their own history. Option two: civilizations that do reach the level of computing power simply choose not to run those simulations, maybe for ethical reasons, maybe for resource reasons, maybe because they just don't bother. Or option three: we are almost certainly living inside of a simulation right now. His argument was statistical. If advanced civilizations eventually develop the ability to simulate entire worlds, complete with conscious beings, weather patterns, political systems, and history, they would likely run thousands of them, maybe millions, which means simulated realities would vastly outnumber the one base reality. And if that's true, the probability that you specifically are sitting in the one real version of events is essentially zero. The paper was published, it got attention in academic circles, and then, for most people, it sat there in 2003. Perhaps it was an interesting read, a theoretical read, but not something that got touched until 2016. Now let's get through what actually happened in 2016. Not as a political timeline, I want to go through it as a sequence of anomalies. We start off with January. David Bowie dies aged 69. He'd released an album 2 days earlier titled Black Star that in retrospect reads like a farewell letter so perfectly constructed it seems almost impossible. Critics called it a masterpiece. He'd hidden his illness from almost everyone. He was here, and then he wasn't, and the album existed as if he'd planned the whole exit. That same month, Alan Rickman dies, 69 years old. Cancer, also kept private. April, Prince dies, unexpectedly one of the most vital performing musicians of his generation, gone at 57 from an accidental fentanyl overdose that nobody saw coming. May 28th, a child falls into Cincinnati Gorilla Zoo enclosure and Harambe is killed, sparking debate why lethal force was used and not a tranquilizer, dividing the internet forever. June, Muhammad Ali dies, one of the most famous athletes in human history. Expected perhaps, he had been ill for years, but the weight of it on top of everything else was staggering. Then come the political votes. June, Brexit. The United Kingdom votes to leave the European Union. Every major poll had Remain winning comfortably. The result came in and anchors on live television looked genuinely confused, like they were reading from the wrong script. November, the United States 2016 presidential election. Again, every major poll, every major predicting model, every statistical forecast pointed in one direction. The result went the other way. The facial expressions of the people calling the result on live television that night became memes because they looked like people experiencing something they genuinely could not process. And then, as if the year wanted to make a point, December, Carrie Fisher dies. Then her mother, Debbie Reynolds, dies the very next day from grief. Now, each of those events individually is explainable. People die, votes surprise pollsters, these things happen. But the accumulation of it, the rhythm of it, the way 2016 seemed to be systematically removing cultural touchstones, upending established certainties, and doing it all with a kind of escalating intensity, that's what people couldn't shake. And online, in forums, comment sections, Twitter threads, you name it, they were being read by millions of people, and a very specific theory started to gain traction. This simulation had been updated or rebooted or perhaps handed to somebody new. Here's where the story shifts from internet speculation to something you can't easily dismiss. In June 2016, right in the middle of all this, Elon Musk was on stage at the Code Conference in California. He was being interviewed in front of a live audience of tech journalists and investor. This wasn't a podcast. It wasn't a late night slip of the tongue. It was a formal, recorded, widely broadcasted conversation. And the interviewer asked him about the simulation argument. Elon Musk didn't laugh it off. He didn't deflect. He said, and I want to be precise here because the wording matters. He said the odds that we are living in what he called base reality are 1 in billions. He then explained his reasoning, which tracked almost exactly with Bostrom's. 40 years ago, he said we had Pong, 2 rectangles and a dot. Now we have photorealistic 3D environments with millions of players. If that rate of development continues, and given the trajectory of computing power, why wouldn't it eventually the distinction between a simulation and reality become indistinguishable? And at that point, simulated worlds will vastly outnumber the real one. Therefore, statistically, we are at that point. Now, the clip went everywhere because this wasn't a philosophy student. This wasn't a Reddit thread. This was one of the prominent technologists on the planet. The man building electric cars and rockets and satellites, saying with a straight face that he genuinely believes the world around you is probably not real. And the timing, June 2016. Brexit had just happened. The US election was 5 months away. The year was already feeling strange to millions of people. Musk's comment didn't create the conversation, but it legitimized it. It gave people permission to say the thing that they'd been feeling out loud. Now, this is where the Mandela effect starts to come into play. Around the same period, another phenomenon was gaining momentum online that fed directly into this conversation. The Mandela effect. Named after Nelson Mandela because a surprisingly large number of people have a vivid memory of him dying in prison in the 1980s. They remember the news coverage, they remember the funeral. Some remember a speech by his widow. And then they discovered he was released from prison in 1990, became president of South Africa, and actually died in 2013. Their memory was wrong, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt like a fact that they'd always known. Wow. Researchers and psychologists will tell you that this is a confabulation, the brain filling gaps with plausible invented detail, and perhaps they're right. But the Mandela effect grew into something bigger than just Nelson Mandela. People started cataloging shared false memories at scale. The Monopoly Man. Does he have a monocle? Most people are certain he does. He never has. Fruit of the Loom. Does the logo have a cornucopia? Millions of people remember it clearly. It doesn't, and apparently it never did. The Berenstein Bears, almost universally remembered as the Berenstein Bears, with an E. It has always been Berenstain, with an A. Now, again, psychologists can explain most of these. Memory is reconstructive. We fill gaps. We're influenced by similar words and images. This is a well-documented science. But the simulation crowd took these examples and asked a different question. What if some of these aren't false memories? What if they're accurate memories of a version of reality that was subsequently patched? What if the simulation gets updated and the patch changes details, but some people's memories retain the old data? A glitch. It's an unfalsified theory. You can't prove it, but here's the thing. You also can't disprove it. And in 2016, the distinction started to feel more important in a way it hadn't before. So before I finish up, I've got a small little section to go. What are your thoughts on this theory?
Well, firstly, I've got goosebumps because every time we talk about things that do with simulations, galaxies, I don't know if you've watched Interstellar, the movie. This gave me goosebumps too when there's all these different dimensions. It always freaks me out because when you sit there and you sit in it, you go, what even is this? I don't know if you have moments in life too where you go, I see the world from my eyes, but then someone else sees the world from their eyes. And so they're viewing you, but you've never viewed yourself. And then when you get down that whole hole of it all, it's just all crazy. And you're like, what even is the meaning of life? How are we even here? And obviously, then those people who are scientific will go, oh, well, it's all about like the Big Bang Theory and Adam and Eve, if you're, into that. So it's just really scary. And the Mandela effect as well. Didn't know that came from, like, I knew it was to do with Nelson Mandela, but I'd never heard of that. But I've heard of all these theories that do with it. So that's like so scary that we thought that he died earlier than he did.
Yeah, it's very interesting because with the Nelson Mandela specifically, I remember thinking that he died, or someone told me that he died, or maybe I learned it at
Mm.
school. And then when he actually did die, I remember thinking that it was so weird. And I asked my parents, I thought he was already dead. And then they said, no, he wasn't. I don't know why you would think that.
Oh
So
my
that's a
God.
really good example. I also think deja vu is a really good example of
Yeah.
a glitch as well, where
Yeah.
we all collectively think something's happened before and we know it in every fiber of our being that we've
Yeah.
experienced this situation before, and you can't prove it and you can't recall when, but you just know something's off. Glitch.
Yes. I have heard that deja vu, and maybe another conspiracy theory here. I have heard that deja vu is real because it's your past life has experienced that exact moment, and that's why you think you've lived through it because you actually have.
Mm, that's an interesting theory. There we go. We're going on a little deep dive down the rabbit hole here. I'm glad you got your conspiracy tinfoil hat on. Going back to the 2016 theory, when Bostrom wrote his paper in 2003, the simulation argument was purely philosophical, through experiment territory only. Then, when Elon Musk repeated it in 2016, it was still largely theoretical, but it was starting to feel more pressing because computing power was accelerating so fast. Now, in 2026, we have a new problem. We have AI generating images, videos, voices, and text that are indistinguishable from reality. We have deepfakes of public figures saying things that they never said. We have synthetic media that forensic experts struggle to detect. We have online personas, social media accounts, profile pictures, comment histories that are completely fabricated, interacting with real people who have no idea. They're purely bots. The boundary between what is real and what is generated has collapsed in a way that would have seemed like science fiction 10 years ago in 2016. And here's the question that's been sitting with me while putting this episode together. If we can already build digital environments that fool human perception, and we're still at the early stages of this technology, what does that say about the likelihood of Bostrom's third option? We are right now building the tools that would make a simulation possible. We are heading at speed towards the ability to run entire conscious worlds inside machines, which means one of two things is true. Either we will develop the ability and use it, in which case, statistically, we're probably already inside a version of it, or something will stop us from getting there. And if you think about what might stop an advanced civilization from ever reaching that point, well, perhaps that's something we discuss in another episode. Now, I'm not telling you the world isn't real. I'm not telling you 2016 was a cosmic patch update and David Bowie was a casualty of the software reboot. But I am telling you that some of the most serious minds working in physics, philosophy, and technology today think the question of whether we exist in base reality is genuinely open. Not settled, not laughable, open. It is perhaps a possibility. And I think that there's something important sitting within that, because if nothing else, if the whole simulation argument collapses under scrutiny tomorrow, it still asks us the right question. What do we actually know? How do we know it? And what does it mean to be certain of anything at all in the world where the ground keeps shifting beneath our feet? 2016 felt like a glitch. Maybe it was just a bad year. Or maybe somewhere they hit a key that they shouldn't have. The 2016 glitch theory.
Oh my god. Goosebumps! Oh, I don't know.
You know,